Hello, hello.
Hello, there we are.
I love that you actually noticed that I was in a different place. It's the sun and stuff behind me, and
Yeah, different pillow, You got the wall decals. It's a good
one of
look. I
those.
like it.
This is where the bed used to be, but it's not
hmm
there anymore. It's for my kid. Everyone, it's my kid's room. Who cares about? Oh wait, I always turn the computer the wrong way. There we go.
Yeah,
There's the
it's
whole.
reversed.
There it
It's always the challenge doing it mirror style.
is.
All right, so we are live. Shall we go ahead and get started?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, per usual, welcome to Agent Talk with Dongwon and Seth. I switch the name sometimes, so I wonder if you picked that up. He doesn't, or whatever. So this is a weekly live stream where us two agents we talk about various aspects of the business, and we do that in the hopes to make the process a bit more transparent for everyone, and most especially accessible and aspiring. To new and aspiring agents. The opportunity to learn the ins and outs of the industry and to actually take from that. So, a reminder, this isn't really a show for writers, unless you want to be an agent as well. The show is free, and we'd always appreciate you kicking a few bucks, though, to POCM Publishing, and Dongwon's going to put up the link. There it is. Cha-ching. So if you could do that, that'd be awesome. And this week we're going to be talking about branding, agent branding. And this, I think what's really been fun about the last few weeks is that we really are building slowly off of each week that we talk about, and there's so much overlapping, but that's because everything directly connects with each other. So we're going to be talking about branding and what it means to be like the small business of yourself. Just like agents, writers are businesses, so are agents, and that's what we're going to be talking about.
Yeah, but first, I'd love to check in on like how your week's going, man. I feel like we're both maybe a little more scattered than usual.
Yeah,
yeah.
So, I think. Go on. What were you going to say? I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, I just thought it'd be nice for people to hear a little bit about like, as we go, sort of what our weekly kind of lives are like, what our work is like, and get a sense of what we're up to that way. Obviously, within boundaries of what we can talk about, a lot of this stuff is confidential and or client oriented or whatever. So,
well, I think that's a great idea. I love the idea of us sharing some of the highs and lows that we can of the week. Obviously within the context of Corona, there's all sorts of things going on, but in general, so I'm heading after this to vacation for a week, and that I actually won't be on next week. We'll have a guest on next week, which will be great.
I gotta fly solo next week,
Yeah. This banter we got together is gonna just get separated. We'll have to start all over.
No, I gotta figure out how to do the intro, all kinds of stuff. Very stressful.
So, but that adds a lot of chaos. All these deals I want to get done. You deal with the clients, and you have to tell them that you're leaving, and then you have to deal with lots of things. So this week was a week of I have a few books pubbing in the next. I had a book pub this week. I have a book pub next week. Mary Robinette Coal is pubbing next week. Samir Pena published this week. Yeah. He had a book called Members Only, which was on which Steven Skeep interviewed him with for Morning Edition, which is just a fantastic, wonderful book, and that was really fun to see happen. And so those are the in the now moments, and then a couple ones coming in a few weeks that we're just trying to get all the pieces together. The mailings, and how do you do mailings with COVID, and you can, but it's just a little bit different. You can't get it as personalized, and so trying to switch along those lines. And the franticness in my voice right now really reflects the franticness of what we were doing with. And because it's the same thing with offers. I had I closed. This is very weird, but I closed, or I am in the process of closing. I think 5 different deals this week.
Damn.
And everything's clear. It'll be off the plate if that's the case. Yeah. So we'll see what happens. But it's been chaos, and good chaos. So what about you? What have you been up to?
Not quite as chaotic, but also having a busy week. I have 3 things sort of floating out that are all sort of option books or stuff that's been long time in development. So kind of waiting for those things to come in. So option book are sort of into the contract. We finished out the first contract with the publisher, and then they have the right, sort of a right of first refusal is one other way of talking about it. They have the right to look at a proposal for the next book that author would do in the same category, in the same genre. So we have a couple of those that are currently out to the publisher. We've had a great experience so far, so we're probably going to re-up with them. But depending on what those offers come in at. So that's always a little bit of a dance of like getting those proposals together and starting to get the feedback from them and getting those offers, what they look like. And then we'll be off to the races in terms of seeing, are those deals where we want them to be and all that. So, it's kind of fun. It's always a fun time, right? Because it's not as stressful as sending out, a wide submission to a bunch of editors. You know what's going to happen. We kind of know sort of what ballpark we're in, and you're working again with the same people. So, it is an interesting moment sort of in an author's career and in what we do.
Well, we'll talk about that another time. Yeah, but options, totally. I feel like options could be really stressful for if the first book had a bad sales record, or if the material is not as strong as previous materials but still good enough, like sort of that kind of game. But it's good to be in.
Luckily these are cases where authors, the books are selling well, winning awards, that kind of thing. So everyone, and really great relationships with editor, with marketing teams. So this is one where I think we're all in it, provided the offer's there, right? Provided the money's there, and provided they're, we feel like they're respecting us and really excited about keeping working with us. So, those are some of the things. But yeah, like you said, we'll probably do a whole episode about how to think about options and how those work. That will probably annoy all of our editor friends.
I know. Well, hopefully they're not going to be watching, This isn't for them.
We should add that this isn't for editors. It's only for agents,
Yeah, I know.
No stealing our secrets.
Did you? I mean, you were an editor. I certainly applied to be, like, when I first arrived, I liked the idea of agenting, but I applied, across town because I just wanted to do, whatever. And the first thing that came up was agenting. So I assume that a lot of you were watching.
A lot of us. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I got a couple books dropping in 2 weeks, so doing some prep for that, dealing with an audiobook issue that's been a little frantic. Spent most of my morning on the phone about that. And
what do you have dropping?
But so I have Brian Van Loan with his debut epic fantasy called The Sin and the Steel, and then Matt Wallace with an epic fantasy series from Saga on the same day. Those are both the 23rd, whatever that Tuesday is.
Yeah.
Pretty sure it's the 23rd. So yeah, very excited about both of those, and they're both sort of like big launches. This is a first full length from Matt from a Big Five publisher, and then this is a debut for Ryan. They're both just like super good dudes writing in epic fantasy, and I love both these series so much. So not to get too pitchy, but
we gotta love our own stuff, right? We gotta love it.
Exactly. But you know how it is heading into launch. It's always like a stressful time as you're trying to get all the last pieces to come together, especially trying to figure out how to do promo, how to do a tour right now, so a lot of online events, a lot of Instagram takeovers, Tor's been doing some cool like TorCon and like, group online things to promote their books over the summer. It's been interesting watching them sort of try and figure out how to navigate this moment. So cool stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right. Well, shall we kick it off? Back to the topic.
Kick it off.
Why do we need a brand?
So, why do we need a brand? I think there's a lot of people who feel like agents don't, right? And I think there are even some agents who would find this topic a little, especially the older generation of agents. I think the people who are sort of, one round ahead of us or a couple rounds ahead of us, find the idea of an agent having a brand to be not quite as important as I would or you would or people certainly coming up in a more social media era. There's a few reasons why you need a brand, in my opinion. One is, getting those new clients in, right? Getting sent the good proposals, getting sent the good writers, for referrals, for queries, all of that. You need to kind of put yourself out there a little bit and be known for doing a certain thing and being known for doing it a certain way. I think that can really help draw people in, right? And then, also working with editors. One thing that people don't really think about a lot is that we also kind of have that process with editors as well. We need big names to reach out to us. We need young people to reach out to us. We need people to come to us as well and have the sense that, they want to have lunch with us. They want to meet us, know what our taste is, know what books we're working on, right, so that we might work with that editor down the line. So really, also we're going out to people, but it's also to bring people in. So having that brand, having that identity online, I find can be really helpful. maybe there's drawbacks to it, maybe there's advantages to it, but having a good brand, I think, is generally a good idea, especially when you're starting out, especially in those first 5-10 years of building up your career. I think as you get more and more established, you can sort of, ease off of that a little bit. I
Right.
think some of the more senior agents don't have quite as strong of a public brand. But again, I don't know if that's a generational thing or if that's a cycle of being an agent thing.
Well, it's a good question. I mean, there is certainly a type of agent who I don't know if they've already gotten to a point where they get to. I think a lot of them have gotten to a point where they get to do something like this, but where they basically have no interest in reaching out. They have no interest in being out there. They don't want to. They don't want slush pile. It's not that they don't want slush pile. I don't want to put them there, but it's just sort of like, they'll do what they want when they want and connect how
your list is full.
Exactly, exactly, and I don't really want. I'm not really, definitely not trying to put them in a down position, but it's like, here's an example. In a conversation, say about like a website, the agency's website. There's, I remember back at Sterling Lord, there was definitely conversations along the lines of like, let's not put our information there. Like, let's put less there. Mm-hmm. Let's not put our client list there. Let's not do those things. Mm-hmm. And you'll see, especially if you look at different agencies, that there are some that are very like, here's every single client we have, and it's done in a specific way. And there's other ones that don't tell you anything, and they don't care. And like, they'll get who they want to get when they want to get it. And you can find out roundabout who they rep. And then there's like us, as sort of like the Gerner Company is a bit of a hybrid. If you look at, like, I have an email signature that basically says like, this month at Gerner. And then we have like basically a highlight, we have a social media presence, which is pretty active, but in general, we have like highlights of a moment. And one of the reasons why we do that is so that we're not like inclusive or exclusive of anyone, but we focus on that which is happening, but we don't have this big full list. You can't find one. If you look at my bio, you don't see one thing that says a client that I represent on my agency bio, but you can find them somewhere. So it's sort of like a hybrid way of doing that, if that makes sense.
Well, I guess that's the sort of last reason why you want to have a good brand is actually you can help promote your clients. You become your own marketing channel for your own clients. If you have strong following on Twitter or on Instagram or newsletters or whatever it is, right? I think figuring out ways in which that your brand can also sort of leverage the clients that you have, whether you get to go on a podcast and plug a book or whatever it is, those things can also be really helpful. I don't know how much they move the needle, right? I don't know that I'm a key part of any of my clients' marketing, but sometimes every little bit helps. So.
Well, I do think so. I think that, again, that's about being at a level yourself that makes it worth someone's while, but I do think so. And also, I think one of the problems and one of the reasons why we're bringing in guests to this series is that, we, even though Don Juan and I represent in a pretty wide range, there is a lot of expertise in different places here too. So for instance, I'm sure a picture book or illustrator agent would have like a whole different point here where their website is literally the portfolio of their clients. Yeah. And they have them there. So art directors of, kids book publishers go to those websites and look and seize art that might be fitting for covers or for picture book proposals that are in. So there are a lot of different reasons and why you do a brand. And some of that has to do with what you're up to, for sure.
Do you feel that your brand is the writers that you represent? Do you feel your brand is you as like an agent, as a person? Do you feel your brand is you as a writer? I mean, you're managing both the agent and the writer brands at the same time, right? So, what do you feel like is your sort of core identity there? I mean, is that the writers? Is that you? I think that's one thing. As you were talking about, like listing your clients on your website where you do some, but not all of them, like, or not that you're picking your favorite one, but
Yeah. No, so the writer thing is tricky. And I just put that in the category of when I'm doing it, I'm doing it. You'll see, like, on my bios, I do tend to say, except on the Gerner Company bio, but on Twitter or whatnot, I do say my picture books, and I do say I'm an agent, and they're both there. Yeah. I tend to be agent first, though, most of the time. That's like my main career. But in terms of what I do think that my client list is my brand, and then the things I do with those clients is also the brand.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like the results, if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense. I think that's sort of the way I picture that. But that also means my brand shifts as I shift, and I think that it's probably the same for you in some ways. I mean, of course,
as we were
you're
talking about
building your
last week.
brand still, though it's there. But I mean, you're still, yeah.
As we were talking about last week, the genres you worked in when you were starting out versus now kind of evolved over time, right? Like, you started out in this very lit space and started doing a lot of web comics and genres. So, I'm sure your brand evolves through that. I think that's why I'm a little bit hesitant to make my brand purely about the writers I represent, right? Because, I still want to have a core identity that sort of carries throughout, that is independent to some extent of, do I represent writer X or writer Y? You know what I mean?
Right.
In part because I don't want to just get writers who are like the writers I'm already working with, right? I kind of want a broader range of things. So, I think that's why I have been pretty focused on having a strong social media presence, and, doing a variety of things. And we're going to talk about some of the strategies that you can do to get into certain areas, and build out that identity. But, for me, I think having a pretty broad reach in terms of how I present online and what people are aware of me doing and talking about, is pretty useful. I mean, thinking about my website, the HMLA website, we don't really list clients that we represent. I think some individual bios will mention a few major things. I don't. On my personal website, I think I put a carousel of book covers on there, but that's mostly because I like book covers and it made the page look more interesting rather than like really needing to list out all my clients. I really need to update that. I think.
But it's interesting because we know authors do look us up, right? So so it is important, but I do tend to not. But I don't list every. I could theoretically list every client, every book, write about why I love them, every award they got, and that would probably be really helpful for people looking for us. But it's not necessary. It's not what you really want, I guess. It's an interesting point, because I guess I could just do that. Is that just too much work? Is it honestly just too much work? I mean, should I explore that as a thing?
I don't know. I think one thing that's really interesting about branding is the way I think about it is, your brand is who you are, right? It's very hard to have a brand that is completely constructed, that is completely something you put on. I think some people are capable of that. I'm certainly not capable of that. I don't have the time or patience or focus to do something like that. But a brand is really about what you're not showing as a result, right? A brand is about like taking pieces of you and putting those forward and then sort of editing other parts of you back, right? Like my personal life isn't really that visible online, right? Like what I spend my time doing, what I do socially, all those kind of things. Most of my life that is online is publishing oriented, or maybe a couple of my hobbies, right? Like scuba diving, woodworking, like there's a couple of things that's like, oh, these are fun. These make me look, a certain way, and are things I'm genuinely proud of and things I genuinely enjoy doing, so I think when it comes to like, do I present my writers as part of what I do? I think sometimes it feels like, no, I need to be supporting theirs rather than using their brand to support my own, right? And that's not really a judgment necessarily. I think that's just like how I end up feeling about it. There's also a weird thing that I don't know how to identify, and maybe this is a weird one to talk about, but there's an element of maintaining our mystique as agents. You know what I mean? Like, not necessarily putting. I mean, this was actually a question that I kind of wrestled with when we decided to do the show. Of like, how much are we putting out there? And I've talked to a couple of other agents who were sort of like, who may be questioning or pushing back a little bit on the idea of this, because they were like, it is showing so much of how we do what we do and how we think about things in a way that I think a lot of agents enjoy having a little bit of the obfuscation around it, both in terms of our identities and how we work and what we do and things like that. I don't know if I have a central point here, but I'm just curious what you think about that.
Well, there's a lot I want to say to that. I mean, I do think there are plenty of things that I don't like sharing with my clients, even though I will if I have to. Like, I don't love sharing a pitch letter even, um, because I pitch the way I want to pitch and I want to have a style and I don't want someone to be.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like a flair. It's more like there could be something in there that I'm putting in for a reason because I know an editor and it might be taken wrong, even though it's a
Mm-hmm.
pro considering to that agent. I mean that editor. So there's like a lot of games to that end, but I don't think that we're doing things here that is exposing too much, because one of the things that, and thinking about this is, first of all, we're not talking to writers, and writers can be here and watching and good for them, but that's not what we're trying to do here.
Right?
It's actually not for them. And we are trying to do this for agents to be better agents to those writers. And the other thing is that we work for writers. So we should disclose everything that we do if they ask, to the extent that we feel comfortable doing that. And when I say that, and if we don't, then an author has the opportunity to not work with us based off of that, right? So I'm sort of fine.
If asked, I will talk through my strategy. I'll talk through what I'm doing. If they want to see the pitch letter, absolutely, they get to see it. Those kind of things. Right. That said, I mean, a lot of what we do ends up being kind of private conversations and kind of, negotiations. Like, there is the room where it happens, right? And that's kind of where we operate.
So what they need to do is they need to trust you to be. To follow that analogy, to be trying to get best for your state's interest, right? For your interest. And so there are different ways to do it. And also there's let's be real here. There are some times that your client's book is not going to get everything that you want it to get, not going to get everything that they want to get. And you sometimes have to do whatever you can to get whatever you can. And we just know what that means. And I understand that perhaps that's sometimes difficult to share that truth with a client. And the truth with the client is you are going to do the best you can to get the most you can in any situation. And that should be the contract, right? That's the main contract. You're hiring them to use those tools. And one thing that you said earlier that also resonated with me is I do tweet a decent amount about random things, I guess. But in general, I also don't tweet about a lot of things because those are things I don't, I'll share pictures of my kid because I don't do that tons on Twitter, more on Instagram. That's more of a personalized thing. But there are, I have a weird set of boundaries that I'm very aware of, and then speaking to you, you have a newsletter, and your newsletter is very helpful. It's very important. It's something that I think does a really great job branding you and getting you out there, and is retweeted virally all the time. It's also very personal. It takes a lot of work because you challenge a lot of difficult things. It's something I think it's you're too brave to do, but you also even get paid for it too. So it's it's a really interesting thing. I mean, you're pretty unique to have. I mean, I a lot of agents do a lot of different things. I know some of them have podcasts, some of them, do blog or are out there like that. But you have one of the most, I think, marquee ones along those lines because of this. And obviously, Kate has one that's less popular than yours. And y'all go back and forth.
Not true. I think she's still ahead of me in terms of subscriber count. So, the founders of Substack enjoy pitting us against each other and occasionally emailing us about who's in the lead for subscriber numbers. So,
but I'd love to know what you think about that, in terms of the context of why you decided to do that. What are the advantages? Are you, compared to other people? Would you recommend? I don't know, something. It's unique to you.
I mean, I think, kind of going back to what I was saying about obfuscation, one of the things that's part of, I think, the brands that almost all agents are trying to do is communicate that we can be trusted and that we are ethical, right? Because those conversations happen where people can't always see them or are one-to-one conversations, then I think there needs to be a strong sense of trust, both on the part of our fellow agents, on part of editors, and on part of writers, that we're going to have people's best interests at heart. We're going to behave ethically. We're going to behave fairly. And so, I think finding ways to communicate that to the world is really important in an agent's brand. And that's something that people want to think about, right? There are certain agents out there who don't have that reputation. Some of them are hugely successful. We're not going to name names. But, I think that's a very specific way of doing business. That's not how I want to do business.
Stick around to the very last episode, the last 5 minutes.
We're just going to read off all the names.
All the names.
It's everyone who's not me and Seth. And maybe it's also Seth. So, no.
Fair.
No. What was I saying? Oh, right. And so, I think part of my brand that I've built over time, and, it's interesting to think how much this is deliberate and how much of it is just accidental or just chasing your own interest. I enjoy thinking about publishing as a business, right? I like thinking about how it works, how it connects. And then I like exposing that or clarifying that to other people who aren't necessarily part of the industry, or like here, people who are part of the industry, right? Yeah. So the newsletter for me was an extension of the fact that whenever I would do a tweet thread where I would talk about one of these issues, or whenever I would explain to my clients how something works, there was always this big sense of excitement and interest in what I was talking about there. So then I had this thought of oh, what if I did a newsletter about that and started talking about it? And then I was thinking, how do I want to differentiate that from, the way a lot of people talk about the industry or general advice books? And I didn't want to do something that was advice about how to get published, right?
Yeah.
I didn't want to be another agent newsletter being here's how you write a query letter, things like that. So then I was okay, Substack is so great, or newsletters are so great into digging into the emotional content. And, at the time I was really obsessed with this newsletter from Helena Fitzgerald called Grief Bacon that was just these incredibly personal, moving essays. And I just loved her work so much. So I was what if I did that for publishing? I mean, that was really the extent of the idea. What if I talked about what it feels like to be in publishing? Because a lot of times it doesn't feel great. A lot of times it does feel great. But, which is sort of how I came to the brand for that, which is publishing is hard. And that became sort of really central to my brand generally, of just publishing is hard. It's hard work. It's hard work to write a book. It's hard work to publish a book. It's hard work to market a book, all of these different aspects. And I want us to take that seriously and really think about it. And so I think that is why when you approached me with this idea, I was so on board, because it just felt like something that I was already doing and wanted to do more of. And then to do it in a way that was really industry facing rather than the newsletter, which is sort of everyone facing. I'm really flattered that you and other peers of mine read it, but it's kind of, that one actually is kind of for writers, right? It is kind of for people who are interested in how the inside of publishing works from the outside. Whereas this is, how does the inside work facing towards other inside people?
Right. Yeah, it is interesting. It took me a while to subscribe to yours because I was this isn't for me, but it just got tweeted around so much. I'll be what is he saying? What is this? Yeah. And then I'll look and be this is ridiculous. One of the things that's funny about it is that it's not ridiculous, by the way. One of the things I would say for branding or for whatnot is when we put ourselves out there in any way, shape, or form, we have so much opinion that we put forth. And I do feel, one thing that I feel is really funny is that when I'm in a room speaking to people on a panel or whatever about agenting, about how to get an agent, they are focused because you guys start. Writers want agents, right? They really want agents. There are a lot of things I talk about that people don't care at all, whatever. They care about how to get an agent, but they also have all this conflicting information. I don't know where they got it. I don't know where it's getting passed around. And the thing that's so interesting is when they raise hands and ask me questions, and I contradict something, I can feel them not care about my answer. It's not that it's not about me.
Yeah.
It's about something that is in there. And I think that's a lesson in general, is that there's only so much you can do. You don't need to kill yourself. I have a couple things, I do a lot of query letter stuff. We all do, whatever, but one of the things I get asked to do a lot is how to write a query letter. I have a whole hour-long thing online about how to do it. But one thing I say very specifically as an example of this is I don't care I don't want you to give me a word count. Word count is always in the query letter. People ask for whatever. And people are whoa. And I'm it's just the word count. It's no big deal. There's no positive there's no positive to adding it, and there could be a negative. So just leave it out. No one's gonna, if someone asks you for the word count, fine. It's not a big deal. But you can see them being ugh.
Yeah. I have a thing like that too. Every single time I talk about queries, there's one thing that I'm like, this is the main piece of advice that's online, and I think it's dead wrong, and I hate it. Right? It's the advice that to not start with the pitch and just to dive right into the copy, right? Or to not start with like a header that's like, here's what this book is, here's what the comps are. You know what I mean? I think it's insane to not tell me the genre before you tell me what the book is. And you know, I find I start every conversation about pitching, I'm always having to be up there being like, everyone tells you to do this thing. I hate it. I think it's a bad idea. Here's why I think it's a bad idea. Right. And, you know, so it is this sort of interesting thing that there's so much like accepted wisdom out there that each of us as part of our brands are really defining both in opposition to that and in support of that. Right. Like, and, you know, so what do you think are the main topics you talk about? Like what, if you were to list like 5 things that you feel like you're known for speaking on, what are those things?
I
mean, defining one's own brand is super hard and very awkward. So I recognize I've just put you on the spot, but
no, it's all good. I mean, I do think, I think that, you know, again, I think query letter is a very real thing because I just get asked to do that a lot. But the more on brand, like me kind of things is, talking about, sort of your career as a whole outside of a single genre. Like I think I'm an agent who works in so many different places that I actively promote and pitch myself along those lines for the clients who want to write multiple things and whatever. So I talk about expanding their own brands. And I think I talk a lot about speculative across genres. So I don't just rep sci-fi and fantasy. I actually rep speculative fiction in the literary space and the YA space, and in sci-fi. You know, it's all the same thing, just in different like zones. And then I think the other thing that I talk a lot about is self-made geniuses. You know, those are web comics, but they're not just web comics. Like it's Anna Bond of Rifle Paper Company and Jessica Hish, who's a letterer and whatnot. You know, sometimes it's just people who are geniuses who do their own thing. And how do you translate that into a book? And there are lots of geniuses that are out there, but it's really hard to see how they push something into a book. So I think those are some of the things. Yeah. And then I also think on like a higher level writer level thing, like for those writers who are trying to leave at mid-career, I think I do a number of those. And sort of the brand with me, I'm just trying to I'm like digging, you're making me dig here. I think the brand with me there is a bit like, is good career building advice and revamping. And I think that's probably one of the big things there. And I'll be clear, like I don't think known for like line editing. I think I'm a good editor, but I don't think I'm a get in there editor the way other agents might be. I think you're known for that, for instance. What about you?
I would love for us to do an episode on, you know, rebuilding a career, rehabbing a career. I think it's a thing that you and I both really love to do. And I think that, you know, we're both pretty good at it in interesting ways. And it's a tricky topic, but I would love to dive into that at some point. Anyway, sorry, that's an aside.
No, that's okay.
You know, for me, you know, I think my brand is really a lot about talking about publishing issues generally. I think I like to speak on a variety of like industry issues, like I said, with the newsletter, this kind of thing, and you know, other aspects of like, here's how this works, here's how to think about this. I think talking about marginalized writers and representation in fiction and in publishing is also a big topic for me. You know, for obvious reasons and for non-obvious ones as well. You know, it's something that really matters to me, and you know, I feel very passionately about. So I'm very comfortable talking about some of those issues. I have a talk that I like to give about decolonizing fiction that I haven't done in a while. I need to find a new opportunity to do that. It's a tricky one to do, but it's one that I really love talking about.
It's important too.
So I think those kind of issues, and then you know, then I have some stuff that's like I try to add some stuff that's like not just book related, not just agenting related. So, you know, I talk about food a lot online. You know, my woodworking is part of my brand, whatever that means. So, you know, a couple things like that, that just sort of like, I try to find a couple things that like round me out as like a human being on the internet too. And I think that's part of like I talk about movies a lot. You know, I try to work in some humor, like some dumb jokes about movies, and, you know, the occasional shit post here and there to sort of like kind of flesh out an online identity in certain ways that I think brings people in and lets people engage. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of the summary of how I think about it.
That sounds very calculating, Don. I feel like now I can't trust
I know.
anything you say or do.
Exactly. The thing about having a brand though is it will feel calculating when you talk about it, but it's not calculating when you're doing it, right? Because
Yeah.
all I do is tweet about stuff I'm excited about, right? Like I tweet about like an amazing meal I had or something that I cooked that I'm hype about, right? So for me, it's just about chasing my excitement online and then realizing that, okay, if I'm tweeting about these topics, maybe there's other stuff I don't want to tweet about, right? Like I don't tweet about books that I'm reading actually, very rarely, because it's kind of hard for us to talk about books that we don't like online. And so I don't want to do something where I'm only locked into talking about stuff that I love. Like if something like that truly blows me away, I will tweet about it because I'm so excited about it. But 90% of what I read, I'm not talking about online. You know what I mean? Which is an interesting thing to realize, that I'm deliberately not talking about books, even though what I do is books.
Well, that's true.
So,
I mean,
that's
it's
one
like,
thing.
some people make their brand about having honest reviews of things.
Yeah.
And we're in a relationship business. And I don't necessarily, if I'm honest, thinking about what you're saying, like I don't necessarily see it as a great thing for my clients to be saying something bad about an editor's book. I just don't see that that's helpful for my future clients who want to do stuff with that editor,
Exactly. And, for me, brands should be really honest. I really think that I don't want to tweet anything that I don't believe in and that I'm not going to support and feel, 100% about. So, if I can't tweet about a book in an honest way, I'm just not going to do it. Right. So, I think that's an interesting thing. So, when you think about a brand, you can be really tactical up front, but I think a lot of the analysis of like when I'm like doing what I just did in terms of explaining what I talk about, that's all post analysis. That's all me sitting there reflecting on, okay, here's how I do, and then maybe trying to systemize it a little bit at that point. Right. But, it's the thing about a brand is you will always have a brand. Always already, you are branded. It's just the reality situation. If you're online, if you're doing business, people will think of you a certain way. So what you need to do is figure out the things you enjoy about that and then find a way to start taking control of that and doing it. There's a Dolly Parton quote that I really love. It's find what you love and then do it on purpose. And it's the do it on purpose is where the branding comes in.
Yeah, that's
okay.
it. It's not.
Oh, sorry. Go on.
No, go on. No.
I was just say, should we dive into some of the main strategies in terms of how to do this in the last few minutes here before we start taking questions?
Sure. I mean, one of them that we were talking about is like cons and conferences, and that's one of the things that I was thinking about is that sometimes, I think every agent at a con has a different style. Like you sort of know them, and at cons it's interesting because they have their like swirling existence of writer. Some of them are clients, some of them are friends, some of them are potential clients, some of them are past clients. There's like a whole thing that exists there. Some agents are BarCon only, others like throw parties for their people, but in some ways it isn't as simple as just showing up and doing what you want there. You have to make a decision when you go to a con. Are you going to go to your clients' panels? Are you going to be, are you not going to see anyone except be at your client's stuff at all times? Are you there actually to see the editors that are there and the other professionals there? Like you have to make those decisions. And part of those is like what you want to do, sort of what you were talking about. And for cons, the other part is like, what do you get out of it? I mean, we're putting an outlay of money to go there and an investment of being there. And some of it is very much, I'm supporting the author who's up for this award. Some of it is very much, I haven't seen these authors in a long time. Like I know, Dongwan, you always have a dinner with your people. I at least always have like a gathering of some sort if I can as well.
Well, actually my agency in particular, I mean, I think Howard is really known for in the industry, and it's sort of an annual flex that sort of is a brand for us, is the Howard Moore Hines family dinner, right? So every year at World Fantasy, we have a black tie dinner with every client who's attending. And, we kind of make a big to-do of it, right? Like everyone gets dressed up, gather in the lobby, hang out there for a photo, and then go to dinner. And then for the rest of the evening, you're seeing all these people in black tie evening dress throughout the con. And it's a little bit of a signal of this is who we are, right? We're an agency, we're a team, those kind of things. And it's a thing that's a lot of fun. I mean, we all enjoy doing it.
It's really
And
annoying.
yeah,
It's like they
other
came
agents
up.
hate us. Other
Well,
agents hate us.
no. I don't hate you at all. What it is basically like I can't do that, right? I can't.
Mhm.
Like, what am I supposed to do? Hey guys, let's all wear white and we'll do
Yeah,
something. So, they
exactly.
sort of, it was a genius
Yeah.
idea. I mean, at San Diego,
I mean, he's been
what
doing
I
it for 30 years too.
yeah,
So
no,
yeah.
for sure. At San Diego, what we do is we basically have like an open, like I sit for like 4 hours in a
Yeah.
hotel. I forget, it's the same one, but I forget what it's called. A hotel lobby, one of the old ones downtown, and basically people come in and out. My clients come in and out because they all have panels and whatnot. So sometimes there's like 10 in there and we're all interacting with each other, but it's not like a locked in time, but it's sort of this fun space. I'm giving them a space, but it's really, that stuff is really fun, but obviously that's a little different.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah. I mean, cons are like that. For writers' conferences, my strategy is really different. I don't really hang out in the bar much at writers' conferences. I will pass through and chat with people, but really I'm there to teach, right? I'm there to, either be part of a workshop, or I'm there to be on a panel or give a lecture. Ideally give a lecture. I love doing that. I love teaching. I used to teach at Portland State and things like that. So, that is really a big part of my brand that I like to roll in is the educational component too. And that's what writers' conference is really good for. So.
As a side note, I remember I was actually on the quiz show panel once as a writer, and I don't know, like Scalzi was doing the questions and whatnot. And I remember that I was so nervous about it because the way people would think about me, because I'm an agent foremost, is that I was looking on YouTube to see like previous questions just so I could get a feel for like what kind of stuff would come my way. And then it was the same questions. So I knew all the answers and I didn't want to look like I cheated. So I like pretended I didn't know the answers. And I got last, and they put a Jar Jar Binks thing on my head, and I was so upset because I was like, why did I think it last? I could have gotten second to last or something. I knew all the answers. I'm sorry, I don't know how I got there, but part of that is about brand, right? It's about like, I really do think about how I present myself and when I present myself along those lines.
Yeah.
All right, so that's the cons a little bit. We're clearly like just talked a lot in this one because it's a bit of a nebulous topic, but you just talked about teaching a little bit. Frankly, I consider this to be teaching. And very important. And I consider the same thing to do this with assistants in the agency. It's easier said than done, perhaps, but it's something that I think is really important. And I more happily Skype into like my authors writing seminars than most things. I really enjoy doing that stuff. But I think also like one interesting one that you made a note of is genre. Like I think it would be foolish to deny that like there's different types of publishing, there's different communities of publishing, and where you exist mainly is a bit of a brand. And especially when like certain places still unfortunately poo-poo different brands, so you do make a commitment. You want to do romance, you're in a romance space. Doesn't mean you can't do other things, but it is a bit of a brand choice where some people will look at you and not work with you because of something like that, for good or bad. And here's a good example of that would be like, say you don't represent any Black writers and someone wants someone who represents Black writers to go with them. They choose not to go with you because of that. Sometimes that might not be your choice, but it's probably your choice. And that's a brand choice, for good or for ill.
That literal thing has happened a couple times for me. Right. And I do represent a couple of Black writers at this point, but, especially earlier days, there were a couple major people who I had really good conversations with, and they ended up going with other people and sort of explicitly said that to me, and not in an offensive way. I took it as really good feedback, but, in a lot of ways, I can't fault them for making that call. I totally get that. That said, one thing to be really careful of on that front is don't make your brand the fact that you represent a certain kind of writer, right? Like I've known some agents who really lean into I represent Asian writers, so you should go with me because I represent Asian writers. And that's very off-putting, I think, to writers. And I also pretty heavily judge that, to be honest. I think being really respectful of the writer, don't let your desire to have a brand overrun your responsibility to representing the writer as best as you can and centering them in any conversation you're having, because it is their show, right? Don't let your brand overrun your responsibility to the people that you're working with, I guess, is the thing that I want to add as the big caveat to this whole conversation.
Yeah, and I guess the truth of the matter is that like your success is incredibly hitched to your authors, and as your clients succeed, then your brand gets shaped by that, because you don't know which clients. I mean, you don't know which clients are going to be the ones that are your big people. So I know that my brand shifted some when I took on Kate Beaton was one thing, but once I took on XKCD, now I like have a very specific type of client I can get, because people come to me for that. But I don't really consider that a brand necessarily. But I also know it's something that's stamped next to my name. You know, people can trust and respect that I like do that kind of thing. So it is an interesting.
I mean, when you have XKCD, you have Nathan Pyle, you have these things, you're going to be known for that, right? And I think that really establishes you in that space.
And known and brand is a little bit different. It's like what you do with those people and how much you want to, you know, be in there. Are you just taking them and shoving them out the door, or are you doing something with them? Is it, you know, and that's where I think the brand comes in, is how they exist within the mindset of what you're doing.
Yeah. For me, brand really becomes about action, right? What are you doing with that? What are the choices you're making? You can be known for something, and you can choose to make that part of your branding or not, you know? So I don't know. We're sort of a little in the weeds on some of these things, because the language gets a little fuzzy. I do think these are. Yeah, let's do some questions. I was just saying, you know, I think it's a fascinating topic. I love talking about it. I think it's really important, both for writers and agents and pretty much anyone in this business. But
I don't think we think about it as much. I think that an agency might think about it some, but you know, it is interesting because we are like independent fiefdoms in our own agency most of the time. There's a number of times that I want my agency to basically be like, we're not going to do business with that film agency anymore unless blank, or even with the big publisher, you know, and we don't, because where everyone's their own deal, and it's hard to unite along those lines. So it's an interesting thing, you know. I don't know.
Totally.
All right. Well, I think Woo-Woo's question: how much of your agent brand is client-facing versus editor-facing? Do you differentiate there? Is a brand more holistic thing? Oh no, we talked a little bit about this off and on, but to give a more specific run, I do think that you can be very purposeful with your editor facing stuff. Now, obviously it's based on the success of your books, but first of all, like how you treat editors, who you submit to with editors, how you interact with editors and salespeople and publicity and marketing is very specific to your brand. You can be the angry, you can be the like stickler, you could be the easy to work with, chill, whatever. You could do a lot of those things, and that's your personality, but a lot of it's your brand. And then you can be very purposeful in other ways. Like, I wanted to be more literary. I wanted to push literary hard. And when The Tiger's Wife came out and was a big literary book, I took the 20 copies of that book and I sent it to all the publishers and all the high-ranking people in the business, because I was very young, and some people
such a smart thing to do when you have an early success, when people don't know you yet, you know?
Right. Yeah. You bank on that kind of thing. And what's funny is that some people, like plenty of places, you know, there was no connection, no response, and that was fine, whatever. But I also ended up on many lunches with publishers thereafter. And I'm not submitting the books to publishers, but I think that I anecdotally, I would say there was a direct uptick in offers from those publishers, because the publishers, the people making the decision, recognized me when one of the other editors had like my stuff in. So you can make like strategic business decisions based off of that stuff, but they recognize me for a reason. It's because I did The Tiger's Wife. That was a brand push that I did. So some of it is like building on yourself, but you're building your own business that way. So that's an editor. That's me only answering the editor facing question. I don't know, Don, you want to ask client? Answer.
Well, I guess I'm curious. What do you listed a few things that you could be known for in terms of how you do business. Which category do you feel that you fall into? The stickler, a yeller, tough negotiator? Like, I don't know.
I'm a little. It's funny. I'm this more than pretty much anything that we've talked about. I'm pretty wary of answering, which is funny because I don't know how I come across.
That's fair. You don't have to. Yeah.
But I don't know how I come across. Like I think that I'm. Sometimes I get so aggressively focused on certain points. Like basically there are things I really, really care about. And I'm there, but otherwise I think I'm chill. So I think that I'm sort of like one and the other and not like impossible to work with. But I think that it's an evolving thing with the editorship, and I'm growing, but in various times and ways. But I don't know how they see me. I don't know.
It's an interesting question, right? So in terms of client-facing brand, I do think it's really important. And that's, for me, working in the science fiction phase, that's where cons really come into play, right?
Right.
So I go to a con, I'm almost 100% bar when I'm at a con. Which I want to be really clear about one thing. Just because it's BarCon doesn't mean you have to be drinking alcohol, right? It's very important for me that, like, yeah, I'll have a drink, I'll have a beer or something like that, but I'm not getting drunk at these things. I'm there to work, I'm there to socialize. And I think one of the big problems we have in our industry is that people drink too much of these things and cause a whole ass mess. And you as industry professionals have a lot of weight and power in those communities, and it is your responsibility to make people feel safe, make people feel cared for, and not that you're going to push and violate their boundaries. Right. So control yourself when you are at a drinking event with writers. That's just like a mini lecture on my part, but it's one that's hugely important to me.
I don't think you have to say lecture. I think that's like we're dealing with a lot of this right now, and I want to say here, like, straightforward, that like I definitely realized in retrospect that I need to be drinking less at those things. Like it's fun to see people, it's fun to interact, it's fun to to do stuff like that. But I have made some mistakes that I have really haunted me, and I don't even mean in the context of I don't mean like a sexual harassment thing, but like, here's something I'm going to be really honest about that was just sort of a mistake. Was like I had smoked some cigarettes casually at these things, because it's like the only time I ever smoked cigarettes. It's not a good thing. I don't like doing that thing. It causes, an issue. And I remember once one of my clients' mother was there and wanted to smoke a cigarette with me, and we went out and smoked a cigarette. And when we came back in, we realized it was at the Nebulas. We realized we missed their kids reading that happened of their, the professional SAG-AFTRA thing. And it was like, it's like one of the most embarrassing and humiliating and shameful things I've done. Yeah. And it was because of something like that. I'm not there to do that. And that is something that like, I've made those mistakes, and this is, we have to look back and see those things. So I want to own some of those things too. But that's the problem with a BarCon, is that this
is part of the right. The thing I was kind of getting at is, I think one of the things I'm known for in terms of client-facing way is someone who enjoys a cocktail, right? Even though I'm not getting drunk at these events, but I'm often seen with the cocktail. I'm into cocktail culture. I like, I really like making them. I like the complexities of them. I know a lot of the history of them, this, that, and the other. But, that's a thing that I actually want to pull back from in terms of my public brand and being known for that aspect, because, it's a really problematic thing. And I think it's a thing that makes our community spaces toxic in a variety of ways. So, that's one thing I'm really trying to think through about my client brand at this point. But generally, in terms of how I interact with writers, I try to be known as someone who is very honest, is someone who's easy to talk to, is someone who you can be friends with without feeling like being pressured to work with me, or like I'm trying to poach somebody or anything like that, right? I'm here often as a sympathetic ear. I like talking to writers. I like hearing about the problems. I'm not going to cross any boundaries in terms of, someone's responsibility towards their clients or whatever. But, so I think having a good, approachable client-facing brand has been really important to me. Which kind of plays in, the brand I try to develop with editors is someone who's good to work with, right? Someone who's collaborative, someone who will work with you to find a solution. Hopefully, I'm also known for standing up for what I feel needs to be stood up for. I don't want to be known as a pushover, but I also want to be known as someone who understands the pain of what it is to solve the problem you're trying to solve, and will work with you to do that at the same time that there are certain things that just aren't acceptable. So, all right, shall we move on to more questions?
Yeah, sorry we talk so much about stuff.
No, I mean, this is so much fun to dig into these issues, and I'm glad to see people, woo. I see you in here every week. Matt Belford, your question's up next. I see you in here every week. It's really nice to see repeat names. It's really nice to see that you guys are getting something out of this. So, okay. Anyways, Matt's question. You've talked a bit about the channels that you both explored. What do you both view as the branding essentials? Social media, website, cons, etc. You kind of listed them. I think having a website is really important. I think I don't like listing all my clients on a website, as we talked about before, but I do think it's important that people have a avenue to find out the kinds of things I work on, right? So I do submit a lot of my deals, maybe not every deal, to Publishers Marketplace. I do like doing announcements for my deals, so that if you Google my name, you'll see a Tor.com post that, we sold so-and-so, right? I do think public-facing announcements are really important for my clients, because they should be able to get the buzz and the attention. And often when you do those announcements, you get a lot of film interest, you get a lot of foreign interest, you get a lot of incoming queries that I think are really important for building attention for a book early. But also those are for my brand too, right? Those are things that increase the Google move me up in page rank in terms of Google results and things like that, and my name, I'm competing with a K-pop star, I'm competing with a major Korean fishery. So there is some competition for, my brand here. And I'm very pleased that I'm ranking pretty high on those things. And that's because I do think it's important to think about those kind of things. Think about Google page rank, think about marketing, think about where you're listed, think about cons and blogs and podcasts, right? Writing excuses has been huge for me in establishing my brand. And that's thanks to Seth, your client, Mary Robinette, really pulled me into that early, and has been really helpful to me to get awareness from, especially on the client facing stuff. So, essential is have a social media presence. Essential is having a website. How you use those things there's a lot of flex and a lot of play in there. Website is for SEO, right? If you don't have a source of truth, then Google doesn't know what to do with you. You basically don't exist on the internet without that. So having a website is really important. Having a personal website in addition to your agency website. Social media, have a Twitter. That's where industry is. Instagram if you want, but Twitter is the important one in my mind. Yeah, I don't know. What about you? What do you?
No, I think you covered.
Add to that list?
Yeah, I think you covered it, and that's good. So I think we should move on. I mean, so by the way, Maria, your question is a great one, but I also, and I'm going to answer that one. I just want to really quick say Dolores' question, who's listening right now, that's a great question too. We'll have to answer that another time. Because I think it's
a big topic and probably its own thing.
Yeah. But for Maria, you kind of touched on this with, sharing info. How do you see your brand influencing or intersecting with your agency's brand? I think you fit in an agency in a specific way. Sometimes there's agencies that are just that, and that's either your boss or wherever role you fit in there's decision in some ways, and sometimes it's how you build yourself, right? So again, when I was at Sterling Lord, they had a few different runs of people doing different things, but they're also, when it comes to fiction, they were like a very literary kind of specific type of place, and I wanted to both respect and follow in that lead, but also start another thread. And I didn't ask permission to do that, but I did get the sense that it was okay. And I will say, interestingly enough, like at the Gerner Company, we are looking for, we're not looking to grow too much. We're looking to hire one or two more actually agents, to be honest. And I guess that's a lot of growth, but there'll be that and then pause for a while, etc. But we are looking for a specific type of thing to come into us. Some of that's business. It's like, what kind of stuff do we need at our agency that would be good to round us out and not compete with each other? So we have passed on some pretty good agents who are basically just like literary fiction agents, mainly because it's not that we don't need another literary fiction agent, but we're looking to do other stuff. So I think that when it comes to your brand, your agency brand, you have to be fine with what fits in there. So me being a writer, for instance, I know directly affects the Gerner Company's representation agreements. Like I would not have some clauses that were too onerous in there because it was not okay. It just wasn't fair. And a number of agencies have that. And sometimes we had to have a compromise along those lines as an agency. Same thing with like there's something that I don't agree with that our agency does, and I'll just be clear about it here. But overall, the agency has a specific thing for it, and other people are totally not like this. And it's and that is slush piles that come in online. We have a policy basically that if you don't hear from us in 4 to 6, well, I think 6 weeks, you can assume it's passed. In other words, we will not pass on. I find that to be as a writer, pretty hard to deal with. Like I would hate, I'd be like, oh, should I check in? Whatever. So I don't love that. But but that is the way that's the way that
Yeah,
has been sort
tons
of
of
decided.
agencies do that. To be clear, I mean,
Exactly.
it's not just you
Yeah,
guys.
yeah, yeah. But the point is that like
I also
you
don't
bring
let
your
people
own,
practice.
but you bring
Yeah.
it on. You bring your own opinion, your own place to it.
Yep.
So basically, you have to be okay with where you're at. Like, why I wouldn't work for some places is because they wear suits and ties. Why would I not work for other places? I don't. There's all
Yeah.
you create your own set of brands and thoughts, and you have to
Yeah.
work into any business that you feel comfortable with. But because you are your own fiefdom,
Yeah.
it's like how you fit in there. Everything from money to like to interactions to like when you make a deal, like are you announcing it in a way that everyone's happy about and we're all connecting with each other and you're celebrating that, or is it like that's a point for Fishman, like, oh, I got to get more points, like what is the mentality of an agency, and that it plays into not just your brand but your job, and we'll talk about that definitely in the future.
Yeah, for me it's a little bit more specific just because Howard, my boss and the founder of the agency, is just so well known for doing genre fiction. He does a ton of other stuff. He has a great nonfiction list. He has a great sort of literary list in addition to that. But because he worked with these huge names in fantasy, especially epic fantasy in the 80s and 90s, that it's just the agency is really well known for that. We're really established in the area. So when I came to him to talk about joining the agency, it was kind of a no-brainer because I was clearly going to work in that area at a minimum, if not make it the core of my business, which it currently is. So, for me, the agency brand really helped me. And I know there was a lot of people I was talking to in early days who were so much more willing to trust me as a new agent because of that brand and because of my reputation as an editor. But, being able to say, hand a card over that was like a classy, nicely printed business card that had Howard's name on it, absolutely opened a ton of doors for me. So, the brand of the agency is important in the way you play into that. If you are in counter to that brand, like if I operated in a mode of business that was very counter to Howard's, I think there would be a lot of conflict and a lot of tension in the agency, and be very confusing to people who were talking to me and looking at me as someone to work with. So, I do think you need to think about, are you a good fit for the agency that you're working with? And sometimes it's a brand identity and sometimes it's a workplace culture. There's a lot of ways to look at that question. But I do think you need to think carefully about how you fit into that and what you want out of your relationship with your agency. And that kind of hints a little bit at Dolores' question, like we mentioned, and we'll get into that more in a whole other episode.
Right.
Okay, we are pretty much out of time. So I just want to say thank you guys for tuning in to Agent Talk. We always really enjoy this conversation. We hope you guys enjoy it too and get something out of it. Seth, speaking of branding, where can people find you on the internet?
I'm in my house. I'm right here right now. No, I'm that was bad. Okay, bad joke. I'm at Seth as Fishman.
This is a branding disappointment face. That's what's happening right now.
I don't know. On Twitter and Instagram, and I have my web and my website as well, and also the Gurner Company website too. So, but that's basically it. Seth as Fishman.
Yep. You can find me on Twitter. I'm at Dongwan. I'm still enjoying knowing how to work these banners. I also have a newsletter like we talked about before. It's on Substack. It's called Publishing is Hard. I write a lot about, how publishing works and how I feel about those things. Anyways, we will be back next Friday, unfortunately without Seth here. We're going to have a guest writer on. My client Amal El Motar will be joining us, and we're going to talk a bit about agent-author relationships, how we start working together, how our dynamic works. And so bring your questions about how to manage a relationship with a writer and how that evolves over time. If you have questions in the meantime, you can email us at agenttalkshow@gmail.com. Until then, be good, read more, and publish better. Bye, y'all.
Bye, everyone.